Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And today, we're going to start in the area of operations along the Dnieper River near Kherson, the city of Kherson, the town of Oleshki, and the eastern, or better known as the left bank or the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. Now, there's a lot of media reports indicating that the Ukrainian military has supposedly taken control of this area on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. Now, that is simply not the case. For the Ukrainians to seize control of a area on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, this would require a multi-brigade operation. The Ukrainian military at this point simply does not have the capability to cross the Dnieper River in the sufficient force needed to secure these areas, and especially the town of Oleshki and the road leading from Kherson into Oleshki, and then ultimately pressure Russian forces in the direction of Crimea, this area here. So what has happened? Well, we believe at this point Ukrainian Special Forces, specifically 73rd Naval Center for Special Operations, have conducted limited operations on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. If I go to the actual deep state map, I think it'll make more sense for you, the viewer. So if we look at this area in question, so you have you have Kherson, the regional capital of Kherson Oblast, which is under the control of Ukrainian forces. Then you have the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. And then you have this area here where the Ukrainians have conducted limited operations with special operations forces, landing small boats with small teams of platoon-size formations, around 18 to 30 personnel in these areas. We have not seen the landing of heavy equipment. We have not seen the landing of tanks, armored personnel carriers. We have not seen the establishment of pontoon bridges across the Dnieper River. Furthermore, the Russians are in a very good position here. You have the town of Oleshki, which the Russians firmly control. Now, are the Russians sitting on the bank of the Dnieper River? Do they have forces there? Probably limited amounts of reconnaissance forces, but more or less they use drones and aircraft and then satellite assets to monitor this area. They don't need to control this area. They have elements of heavy artillery brigades with Uragan multiple launch systems. They have a wide range of aircraft that are deployed in this area that would make it very, very difficult for the Ukrainian military to establish a bridgehead in this area. So make no mistake, the Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian ground forces, has not established a bridgehead on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. It has not been done yet. Contrary to what's being reported by mainstream media about this activity of Ukrainian forces on the eastern bank, they have not established a bridgehead yet. Not a bridgehead that is going to allow multiple Ukrainian combat brigades to cross in this area. The Ukrainians are very well aware that if they were to try to move a multitude or the needed force construct to make a move on Oleshki with multiple brigades, they would face withering Russian fire. So again, you have Russian forces in defensive lines deployed in the city of Oleshki. And then not only do you have the obstacle of the actual Dnieper River, you have this very marshy area. And I don't know if anyone's had the opportunity to see marshlands maybe on the eastern coast of the United States in areas such as in Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, with reeds and high water table. This is what this is. And then you have, obviously, small communities living on the coast of the Dnieper River as well. But again, once they cross the Dnieper River, you have terrain features, rivers, before you even get to the main city of Oleshki. They would have to establish a bridgehead in this area here and then conduct offensive operations down this main road towards Oleshki. Again, bridgehead here, bridgeheads in this area, pontoon bridges across this river before they even get to the city of Oleshki, which is covered by the following Russian units. I'm going to go over to where you, the viewer, can kind of see what units the Russians have in this area. So you have the 439th Guards Rocket Artillery Brigade. Again, this artillery brigade, among others, would saturate those crossing points where the Ukrainians would try to attempt to establish that bridgehead. You have the 126th Separate Guards Coastal Defense Brigade. That covers this area as well. The 11th Separate Assault Brigade, which is an airborne VDV formation. These are elite light infantry. The 385th Motorized Rifle Regiment. Elements of the 5th, obviously the 5th Combined Arms Army. Another artillery brigade. So you have major elements of 2 artillery brigades protecting Russian forces from a possible Ukrainian landing assault on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. You have the 34th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade. This is acting more as a fire brigade, a rapid response unit to move in and engage Ukrainian forces that would be crossing the Dnieper River. Elements of the 49th Combined Arms Army. And then the 205th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade. And then again, you have other units that aren't even listed. You have Spetsnaz operational units, 10th Separate Special Purpose Brigade operating in this area as well. So again, what we're seeing is limited landing operations with small boats by the Ukrainian military. Again, we are not seeing multi-brigade, large-scale landing operations with tanks, armored infantry fighting vehicles, amphibious assault craft, those things needed to cross this fairly difficult terrain feature, especially given the fact that these bridges have been blown across the Dnieper River. If and the Ukrainian military knows this, if they were to cross en masse and try to make an assault on Oleshki, it would be a nightmare endeavor for them. And especially given that much of this area off-roadway is still very marshy, still very inhospitable to heavier tracked armored vehicles. Again, it would just be something incredibly difficult. Again, I think right now what the Ukrainians are trying to do is create disinformation. They are also attempting to see how the Russians respond to reports of possible Ukrainian landing operations on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. They're seeing what the Russians are going to do, and they're probably taking the liberty to as the Russians maneuver and bring up forces for any possible suspected Ukrainian mass crossing of the Dnieper, they'll try to launch long-range precision fire missions against those Russian forces. But I don't think at this point we're seeing the start of a large-scale Ukrainian offensive designed to cross the Dnieper River en masse and then press its way down towards Crimea. I don't think we're seeing that. And the likelihood that the Ukrainians would stay in these areas given the resources that the Russians are going to use against those Ukrainian forces that marshal in this area, is going to put those forces in a very uncomfortable position for Ukraine. Now, in all likelihood, I believe what we would see first is a larger operation by Ukraine in this area near Orkiv, south of Zaporizhia, against Russian forces in these open steppe lands in Zaporizhia. Now, if the Ukrainians appear to be successful in this area, and Russian forces start to withdraw and they start to have problems, then I think it's possible there is a contingency plan in place where the Ukrainians at some point could look at conducting a mass crossing of the Dnieper River at some point. But I don't think that's happening right now. Again, I think this is more or less a reconnaissance operation by these special operations forces of the Ukrainian military, specifically just on the opposite bank of the city of Kherson, in between the city of Oleshki and these very marshy areas, again, that is just not ideal for maneuver warfare, fast maneuver warfare. You're seeing small boats land dismounted infantry with no motorized capability on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River is what you're seeing right now. And that is not going to lead to some large-scale Ukrainian offensive in this area. It's just not. Now, we are continuing to see the Russians assert control over Bakhmut. We talked about this yesterday. It's all but game over in Bakhmut for the Ukrainians. Very difficult situation. I would imagine that the Ukrainian battlefield commander who is in charge of defensive operation in Bakhmut is probably not very happy with the political leadership in Kiev. And again, the Russians just continue to tighten this noose. They are conducting these fix and destroy missions against Ukrainian forces. And then eventually, just as we have seen the changing of territory, and then we'll fast forward here, and this will continue. It's just a slow, methodical process by the Russian military to clear out Bakhmut. I don't believe we're seeing human wave assaults by the Russian military. I don't believe the Russians are doing that. I think you're seeing reconnaissance units, Spetsnaz units, Wagner units moving in with the support of air assets and heavy artillery, clearing out these urban redoubts of Ukrainian forces. Not human wave attacks. It's just not done like that. It's not. But believe what you want and take it as you see it. I'm just trying to tell you the truth, and that's kind of where we sit right now. We'll continue to monitor. We will continue to report. Thank you for joining us today. More to come very, very soon. Have a good day.